wind didn't care who lived or died out here, and neither did the land. What mattered was who found you first. And on that cold ridge, with wolves closing in, time was already running out. The wind rolled down from the north, sharp and dry, slicing through the high desert without slowing, carrying with it the thin, tired light of late day. The kind that comes after the sun has already given up its warmth. Frost hardened the ground in the shaded pockets, and the air smelled of dust, cold stone, and something faintly sour, meat perhaps carried in fur. Nayeli stood with her back against a cedar post driven deep into the slope. Old wood split along one seam, but strong enough to hold her weight. Her wrists were bound high above her head, rope pulled tight until her hands had gone numb, the fibers biting into skin already raw. Her ankles were tied close together, forcing her upright, every muscle locked and burning. The cotton dress she wore, once earth-colored, was now streaked with grit and dirt, torn at the side to expose the hard line of her thigh, the neckline sagging unevenly, showing more than she wished to offer the world. She kept her breathing shallow, partly against the cold, partly to keep fear from spilling out of her chest. She had been left there for hours. Her shoulders throbbed, calves cramped, fingers burned with the slow ache of blood denied. Each small shift meant the rope cut deeper, punishing movement. Wolves moved low in the brush, bodies sliding through grass and scrub, nearly invisible until the wind dropped and she could hear paws brushing dirt, circling, patient. They were waiting. Nayeli had been left as punishment. The details no longer mattered. A cousin's spite, a lie fed to the wrong ears. Truth had no weight where she stood. No one from her band would come. That certainty settled heavy and cold inside her. She had decided she would not cry and she would not beg. If this was how she died, she would meet it standing. Far south of the ridge, Luke Harlan moved through a series of low washes, angling toward the canyon rim before night closed in. He wasn't headed anywhere in particular. He rarely was anymore. Years back, he'd ridden ahead of cavalry columns, scouting waterholes and passes, paid to see first what others would stumble into blind. The war ended, but the memories didn't. Afterward, he buried his wife, sold the small piece of land they'd tried to build a life on, and took to drifting with his horse and what he could carry. Moving hurt less than sitting alone with the quiet. He'd spent the afternoon riding Badland, checking an old trapping route he once used. When the wind brought it to him, long stretched howls, wolves and close. That alone wasn't strange. But the way the calls overlapped made him draw rein and listen. It sounded focused, gathered around one point. He nudged his horse north, hand loose near the rifle. The ridge rose ahead, and the cedar post stood out against the grey sky. At first, she was just a shape, thin and upright. Then he saw the torn dress, the ropes, dark hair snapping in the wind. He stopped 100 yards out. The wolves were already inside 50, pacing in half circles, testing distance. Luke slid the Winchester free, worked the lever, and put a round into the dirt just ahead of the nearest wolf. The crack echoed hard off the rock. The animal skidded back, startled, then vanished into brush. Another lingered too close. Luke sent a second shot over its head. The pack broke, melting into low ground. When the ridge went quiet again, he dismounted, rifle in hand, boots crunching over frozen soil as he scanned brush and horizon. He wasn't looking for trouble, but it had a way of finding him. Up close, she looked younger than he'd thought. Her face was tight with pain, but her eyes were sharp, watching him, weighing him against the men who'd left her. Luke slung the rifle and drew his knife, stepping close enough to smell dust and sweat. He slipped the blade under the rope at her wrists. When it parted, red lines bloomed as the tension gave way. Her arms dropped and she nearly fell. Her own weight, too much after hours, held upright. He caught her, one arm firm around her waist. She was warm despite the cold. She pulled away as soon as she could stand. He crouched, cut the rope at her ankles, then stepped back, giving space. He didn't crowd people. He offered his canteen. She hesitated, then drank, water spilling down her chin. He draped his coat over her shoulders. She studied it, then pulled it close. Wolves still moved out there farther now. He tilted his head toward the horse. She understood. He lifted her into the saddle, swung up behind, took the reins, his arm steady around her to keep her balanced. They rode off the ridge at a careful pace, leather creaking, hooves steady, wind combing through sage. Neither spoke. Luke didn't know her story. She didn't know his. For the moment, it was enough that the post lay behind them, and the wolves were falling back into dark. The cold pressed harder as daylight bled out, and he felt her weight lean against him more with each mile. Her breathing eased as distance grew. She was still asking the same question he'd seen in her eyes. Who was he and what did he want? When the trail dipped into a narrow wash, the wind dropped. Luke checked behind them. No wolves, no riders, only rock and sage. Leaving the post standing bothered him, but night was close. He could deal with it later. You hurt anywhere? He asked, voice low. She shook her head once, hand clutching the coat lining. Another half-mile brought them to a canyon mouth, smoke threading into cold air. His cabin sat tucked against stone, mac wall built into rock, a small corral to the side. Cut wood stacked neat under tarp. He swung down, steadied her as she slid from the saddle. Her legs buckled, but she caught herself. Inside, the cabin was spare but solid. Bed along one wall. Table and 2 chairs, shelves with jars, a pot over the stove. He barred the door, set his hat down. Sit. She lowered herself onto the bed. Fingers curled into the coat like it was the first sure thing she'd touched in days. He handed her water. She took it. Rope burns showed dark and swollen now. He fetched cloth and whiskey. This'll sting. She flinched, didn't pull away. He wrapped her wrists, steady hands, no rush. She watched him silent. I was running traps south, he said finally. Heard the wolves. Didn't expect you. Her gaze dropped. You could have left me. I could have. He didn't add more. He warmed beans, the smell filling the space, slid a plate to her. She ate slow, careful. When she finished, he set a blanket by the bed. You take this. I'll take the floor. She searched his voice for a price and found none. He lay near the door, checking his rifle by lamplight. She lay back, eyes open, watching, waiting to decide what kind of man he was. Luke knew trust took time. That was fine. Tonight she was alive. The walls were thick. That would do. By morning the wind had shifted. Softer now, carrying the smell of sage instead of blood and cold. Luke was already awake when Naeli stirred. The fire was low, the cabin quiet in a way that felt earned, not empty. She sat up slowly, testing her wrists. The pain was still there, but it no longer owned her. Luke handed her a tin cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed, brief and unspoken, but it held weight. She told him then, not everything, just enough. About the cousin, the lie, the way fear can turn familiar faces into strangers. Luke listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. You won't go back to that, he said. It wasn't a question. Outside, the ridge stood empty. No wolves, no riders. Only the wide land opening up under a pale sun. Luke saddled the horse, then stopped, looking at her. There's a place east of here, quiet, no posts. No ropes, he waited. Naeli stepped forward on her own, lifting her chin. Then I'll ride with you, she said. They left the cedar post behind for good, swallowed by distance and light. The land stayed hard, unforgiving, but they moved through it together now. And for the first time since the rope went tight, Naeli wasn't prey anymore.